Welcome to the Foundation Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. Today's episode is short but sweet. I'm diving into one of the most operationally critical and often overlooked responsibilities of any head of people, the compensation cycle. I'm joined once again by Melissa Theiss, and we get into the weeds of how to budget properly for the annual pay review. We break down the 5 essential compensation buckets every people leader should know and how to build a strong partnership with finance to get it right. Let's jump in. All right, welcome to the Foundation Series. Melissa Theiss, I have been so excited to have this conversation with you. I think I've certainly been fangirling over your content on LinkedIn for a long time. I think you have such a really interesting commercial lens to a lot of the different things that you talk about under the sort of head of HR within a startup remit. So really excited to welcome you to the Foundation Series. I'd love it if you'd spend a quick minute introducing yourself for those who maybe aren't as familiar with you as I am, and then we can dive into our exciting episode.
Sure. So Melissa Theiss, I'm a 4-time head of business and people operations, currently the head of people operations at Kit, the email-first operating system for creators who mean business. I'm also the founder and principal of Fledge, an HR consulting firm that helps people leaders think like business leaders. So very appropriate for how you view my content on LinkedIn. Good to hear.
Absolutely. And amazing to have you here. All right, Melissa, I am keen to pick your brains around the startup compensation cycle. I think it's something that continues to be, a process that changes probably year on year for most organizations, depending on their stage of growth. There's a couple of really key elements that I'm eager to explore with you. So let's start with probably the most interesting one out of the few questions that I've got. How should the head of people approach budgeting when it comes to the compensation cycle?
Yeah, well, the first thing is you and your head of finance should be best friends. But then the second thing is I like to think of the people budget for compensation in 5 different buckets. Now, some heads of finance are going to want to have that subdivided the same way that I do. Others are going to want to roll it up in certain ways, which is fine. I just like to know how it was calculated so I can separate it out. So I separate it out into merit-based performance increases, promotion increases, market adjustments, if it's applicable, international inflation adjustments, and then signing and retention bonuses. So kind of how you would look at each of those. For merit-based performance increases, a lot of people will ask, like, what average % raise should I give? I see that question all the time. First of all, there's amazing benchmarking information out there. If you don't already follow Matt Shulman for PAVE, he announces data like this all the time. You should definitely follow him.
Great shout out. I'll link him in the show notes.
Yeah. He even breaks it down by like average performance rating. I mean, he answers this question like probably once every 3 months with the latest updated data, regardless of whether or not you're a PAVE customer. But so I'll focus on what I think isn't talked about enough, which is how you actually think about like what percentage of your employee base should be getting a merit-based increase. So if you have an annual performance cycle, it's probably like 90 to 95%, everyone who's meeting expectations or above. If you have a semi-annual performance review cycle, it's probably like 45% twice a year, unless you have a higher percentage of people who aren't meeting expectations, or if you have seasonal hiring, that's a big one, in which case you might be hiring more people in Q4. And so your first kind of semi-annual cycle after that, you're going to have fewer people getting merit-based raises because they haven't hit tenure requirements that you have on hand. And so then you need to stack a higher proportion. So just think about if you have a semi-annual cycle, do you actually want your merit-based raises 50-50, or did you need to break that distribution down differently? And then what percentage of your total population are you allocating giving merit-based raises? And the answer should not be 100%. Those 2 factors are overlooked way too often. And then people often consider looking for the benchmark of the average % raise, which is totally fine. For promotion-based increases, you usually want to be looking at like 10 to 15% for promotion-based increases, just higher than what you would do for your merit-based increases. It depends a little bit on whether or not you overlap your pay bands, or if you have your pay bands directly touch each other. So just take that into account. You can work with your head of finance on that. Market adjustments. So if you do market adjustments and then move your pay bands and then move people's position within their pay band or pull them up if they have fallen outside of their pay band, I tend to like to do that once a year, but you just need to decide how frequently you're going to do it or if you're going to do it at all, in which case you need to allocate additional funds for that performance review cycle above and beyond what you've allocated for your promotions and merit-based raises. A really common problem I see is that people decide they want to do market adjustments, but they don't change the amount that they're allocating. And so market adjustments draw down directly from promotion and merit-based comp increases, which most specifically hurts your high performers. That's the people you most want to retain. So you don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's the thing I see hit a lot, right, is that you don't factor in all of these buckets, and then the budget is actually less than it should be, but it ends up getting used for all of these 5 areas, and it just doesn't stretch.
Exactly, which is why I like to separate it out and I like to calculate it on my own and actually pass my calculations from a census report to the head of people and then to the head of finance, and then have the head of finance show me how they want to roll it up and reflect it in the budget. So I can identify which line items reflect each. But this is one of the areas where like I generally am not like a micromanager human. I will micromanage this with the head of finance. I want to know where the money is, whether or not the money was allocated for, and if the money wasn't allocated for, because it won't always be, like, we got to get ahead of it. Like if we're reducing our average raise amount, or if we're not going to be able to do as many promotions, like we need to message that with managers and we need to get ahead of it. The next bucket only applies if you have a global team and if you don't pay everyone in the same currency, but international market adjustments for currency change. So if one country has hyperinflation, are you doing currency adjustments? If they're based to wherever your headquarters currency has changed, are you going to adjust for that? And then signing and retention bonuses. So signing and retention bonuses will probably be put with your overall bonus accruals and commission accruals from the finance team that will be handled differently. But I like to have a policy that says, we won't give signing or retention bonuses to more than X% of the population. And so I recalculate that on an annual basis based on our current and forecasted headcount. And so you should work with your head of finance on this. I think that heads of people do not spend anywhere nearly enough time on this. And they get so frustrated at the rest of the team when they have to deal with the cleanup. But you won't have to do as much cleanup if you just help more upfront.
Completely agree. There's so many takeaways from just this one section. I mean, huge +1 first and foremost to becoming besties with your head of finance. I cannot more greatly emphasize that relationship. I think in particular as well, if you don't feel confident with a spreadsheet, I mean, firstly, start getting confident. But secondly is lean on that finance team to help you understand that. Come at them with this approach and say, here's the range of things we need to consider. Let's talk about how to factor that in, lean on some of the research. And like you said, there's so much available. Pave is a great resource. Matt Schulman is a great resource. There's so much data out there to help you understand what the market's doing and how you can factor that in. And talk about the impact of the business if you don't. What do you stand to lose if you aren't hitting these 5 different things? What is it likely to result in terms of if people aren't getting merit-based pay increases because all the money has gone to retention bonuses or something? What's it going to do for your high performers? So have that conversation with them and really come at it with an approach of how can we actually robustly calculate what we need for this upcoming cycle. I love it. Super practical.
And I think there are other things that you can do to earn goodwill and social capital throughout the year that takes more time from your head of finance to do one of the most stressful parts of their job, which is the annual budgeting. And so I acknowledge that and I try to be upfront with that. And I say, this will help me do my job throughout the year. And so let me help you do your job throughout the year as well. So one of the things that I do that a lot of heads of people don't, that heads of finance find super helpful in a startup environment. You absolutely should not do this at a giant company. You should just forecast it out, average it out. But I will look at I do a recruiting pipeline deep dive for every single open role we have every single week. And we have the original expected hire date and then the current anticipated hire date. And I go either weekly or monthly, depending on the preference of the head of finance. And I update that in a draft budget and I push it to them. And that frees up cash flow if we're expected to hire later than we thought or earlier than we thought, or it takes cash flow. And it just gives them a more accurate look. Again, if you have 100,000 people, you just smooth that out because you also have turnover that you didn't anticipate. But if you have 20 people, if you have 50 people, if you have 100 people, people getting hired 2 months earlier or later than expected actually makes a real difference for your budget and their ability to try to balance the numbers that they're required to do. If you invest that little bit of extra effort for them throughout the year, they're just more willing as humans, as people, to invest the little bit of extra effort that you are asking for in the stressful budgeting season to help break out the budget the way that you need to see it in these 5 buckets.
Yeah, so true. Amazing. Melissa, that is the episode. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. This is definitely one of the challenges I see and have grappled with a lot myself over the years. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a wrap on today's deep dive into compensation cycles. Melissa shared a practical framework for structuring your people budget, from merit-based increases to market adjustments and retention bonuses, and why getting this right is a critical lever for talent retention and trust. If you're not best mates with your head of finance yet, now's the time to change that. If this episode helped sharpen your thinking, give it a share, leave a review, and I'll see you next time on the Foundation Series. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.